The most basic of all human needs is the needs to understand and be understood. The best way to understand people is to listen to them. I love this quote because it teaches the importance of communication. Communication is the process of sending and receiving messages. You should consider taking business communication because it teaches you how to effectively communicate through teaching you how to analyze your audience, how to recognize and understand nonverbal communication, and how to use effective language. Let's start by talking about your audience. By analyzing your audience, it helps you determine the specific needs of your audience. For example, by determining the level of understanding your audience may have, may change the level of complexity of your speech. Let's say you're giving a presentation to an audience with a low level of understanding. You probably want to keep your presentation simple in that case, as opposed to people who have an understanding of the material already. Also, by identifying cultural needs, it may change the language and method of your presentation. When giving a presentation to people who don't speak English well, you may even want to consider using an interpreter. Let's move on to nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is the process of sending and receiving information both intentionally and unintentionally, without using written or spoken language. This is often overlooked as a method of communication, but a lot of information can be given through nonverbal communication. The main methods of nonverbal communications are facial expressions, gesture and posture, vocal characteristics, personal appearance, touch, and time and space. A lot of information could be drawn through somebody's facial expression. Generally, when they're accepting of something, they will look happy and positive, when they're not, they'll look negative. That's just an example of nonverbal communication. Let's move on to language and vocabulary. You may want to change your language depending on the message you are sending. You might want to take more of a direct approach when your audience is likely to receive the information, and an indirect approach when they are unlikely to receive. A direct approach is more like a notification. You just get the information out there and justify it later. An indirect approach, you might want to start with the justification because it is unlikely to be received by your peers. When dealing with people of another culture, you're going to want to use as simple language as possible. And you're going to want to try and use bias-free language and avoid using unfamiliar words. You may sound cool or important by using big words, but the audience isn't going to understand what you're talking about. In conclusion, we've already discussed how communication is one of the basic necessities of life. Therefore, it is important for you to be able to effectively and clearly communicate with others. Business communication helps accomplish this by teaching you how to work through and properly address your audience and recognize their response, whether verbal or nonverbal. And it also increases your knowledge of how to clearly address your audience. You should take business communications.